Hello, welcome to another episode of the Intel with Greg Cosell on the Inside the Birds platform. I'm Jeff Mosher alongside Adam Kaplan, and with us, as always, is Greg Cosell to preview the NFL draft. This will be the final installment of the Intel with Greg Cosell before the NFL draft, and we're going to wrap up. I know, Adam makes a face. I can't believe it's already here. We're going to wrap up some of the positions we haven't discussed yet with Greg, and that's cornerback, safety, linebacker, which is basically an overall look at the back end of a defense. And Greg, as we know, these are all the prospects we talk about. The Eagles will have checked out in some form or fashion, not only because they check out every prospect, but these are big areas of need for the Eagles and NFL teams.
I would say that's a fair statement, Jeff. So we'll see. We'll see how the Eagles go about this draft. There's certainly linebackers available, stacked backers. There's always corners and wide receivers. It just depends on how you evaluate them. There's always corners and there's always receivers in any given draft. Normally, they're the two positions that have the most players drafted every year, more than 30. That's kind of the way it goes. So there's always corners. It depends on your scheme, on what you like. The one thing I've always said, and I said this to I was talking to someone last night, and we were talking quarterbacks actually, and I said that I bet that every coach would have the same 15 traits for a quarterback. It's just what value do they ascribe to particular traits. It's probably true with a lot of positions. I think in an ideal world, if we're going to talk corner, obviously people want guys who in an ideal world would be long, would be sudden, would be twitchy, can play man. I mean, it just depends on your scheme. But I'll tell you one thing, in the NFL, if your corners can't play man coverage at some point, you're going to have a problem.
Greg, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I also wanted to ask you, as a tape evaluator for as long as you have, there are certain positions that carry a greater or a decreased percentage of hit rate in the NFL. Cornerback tends to be one that is more difficult in the first round for teams to hit on. You see a lot of misses at that position in the first round. What would be your estimation as to why that is?
And again, so people understand, I didn't know you were going to ask me that, so it's not as if I have a prepared answer to that question. I would say that corner position is one position where the difference between the NFL and college is really large. First of all, the field is different. So corners have different responsibilities in college and the NFL.
Great point.
Secondly, the receivers that they face in college, with very few exceptions, are nothing like the receivers they're going to face in the NFL. With few exceptions, the SEC being one of them, and that's clearly the best college conference, you don't see a ton of press man coverage. You're starting to see a little more over the years, but you normally don't see a ton of it. So you don't know really if corners can play that. And there's a great example in this draft with a corner we will speak about. I'll tease that. I won't mention his name. We'll get to it. A corner that's considered a really high-level prospect based on traits, but did not play hardly any press coverage. So you're starting from scratch. And I spoke to a coach about that and said, yeah, you start from scratch. So, these are things, there's a lot of things you don't know, Jeff, when you evaluate corners that, you look, a lot of people can look at traits. When corners have high level traits or any position, that's in a sense the easy part. It's going way beyond that. And there's so many variables. And I learn that more and more each year. And everybody wants it to be a black and white or a mathematical equation. Hey, this guy's a great prospect. This guy's going to be an all-pro. It's just really hard to do that. There's so many variables. But corner, hopefully I gave a few reasons that I think are valid that make sense.
Yes. No, I think it's a great. I think we need to have that discussion first before we start evaluating cornerbacks.
And I just thought of it as you asked. As I said, it's not as if I have this down on a sheet of paper and I knew you were going to ask me. It's just things that, doing this that I think about when I watch corners.
Yeah. By the way, our audience knows there's no softballs here, Greg. We put you on the spot all the time. All right. That's not what we do. We don't no layups in this podcast. All right. So with that all being said, why don't we start off with a prospect who Adam and I both talked to a lot of people about. I'm sure you have too. He was very, very good at the Senior Bowl. And a lot of people tell us that Yeah, we'll worry less about his translation to the NFL because of all the, not just the traits, but his abilities and his mechanics. I'll let you describe what you think of Toledo's Quinyon Mitchell based on his
Well,
tape.
and he's the guy I was speaking about, by the way. He
Oh,
hardly ever lined up in press coverage. He was an off coverage corner almost exclusively at Toledo. So now, and by the way, he's got everything you look for. He's over 6 feet. He's 195, but he's built like a running back. His 40 time was off the charts, great vertical jump. I mean, he looks the part. And there's no question playing off coverage, which, as I said, he played almost exclusively in Toledo's defense, that he is one of those classic click and close, plant and drive corners. He did that with explosiveness, with suddenness. For someone the way he's built, that he clearly looked sudden and twitchy. He was really, really good running with vertical routes with his speed. Didn't make many interceptions. He doesn't have great ball skills based on tape, but he was really, really good at the catch point with just great timing to get his hands on the ball and knock it out of receivers' hands if need be. So there's an awful lot to like about Quinyon Mitchell. You just have to basically teach him how to play press coverage. And again, I'm not a cornerback coach, so I'm not going to sit here and say that's hard or easy, by the way, but you didn't see it. He didn't do it very much. And the ball skills are, for some, would be a concern as well. He doesn't have great ball skills.
Interesting. He had a great week in Mobile, and Greg, as you know, the combine was also great, and
oh yeah,
he's been sort of a high riser.
He could easily be considered, given his size and his speed, the best corner prospect in the draft. I know you have Terry and Arnold, who we'll get to. And just so people understand, there's no Patrick Surtain in this draft. Now, corners always get drafted high because it's a premium position in the league, and in some ways becoming even more and more premium because the quick game, the RPO game, it's hard to rush the quarterback when the ball comes out so quick. And I'm talking obviously normal down and distance situations, 3rd and 9, everything changes. But so corners are becoming even more and more important in their ability to play press because you have to disrupt receivers because you're not going to get to the quarterback. So corners becoming even more and more of a premium position. So corners will get drafted high, but just so people understand, there's no Patrick Surtain in this draft.
So Greg,
that doesn't mean any of these guys won't become really good. That's not
sure.
All we're doing is all we can do is evaluate it based on what we have as they come out.
In terms of how they transition and attributes and so forth. So we'll stay on this high-end vein in terms of where we think these guys are going to go. And you mentioned Terry on Arnold. I know there's going to be debate whether it's Wiggins or Arnold who goes second, but let's stick with Arnold and how he transitioned to the next level.
Yeah, Arnold's a really he was kind of a fun guy to watch because he's super physical, super competitive. I mean, as a tackler in the run game, and not that you're necessarily drafting a corner for that reason, but this guy was really competitive. And you could see that meant something to him to play that way. Now, he predominantly lined up at left corner in Alabama's defense. They did not switch. They had Arnold at left corner, McKinstry at right corner. He's got pretty high-level traits. Both Alabama corners, but obviously we're talking about Arnold. He was what I would call a mirror match master. He wasn't necessarily physical in terms of jamming receivers off the ball, but he matched them. Mirror match is what we call it. And he has really light, deceptively sudden feet, really good movement, smooth hips, easy transitions. Fun guy to watch. I would say that there was probably one thing that stood out that's going to need to be cleaned up. He lost contact with receivers at times at the top of the route stem when he was in press coverage, when he was mirror match. And that's just something he's going to have to work on because obviously, you're going to face really good receivers at the NFL level. And if you start losing contact with them at the top of the route stem, you're going to have a little bit of a problem. But other than that, I thought he is a good prospect.
Okay, let's sort of kill two birds with one stone then before we get to Wiggins. Let's also talk about Kool-Aid McKinstry. Give me your evaluation and compare and contrast, if you will, with Arnold and which you see as the, which jumps out on tape to you as a better prospect.
Well, it's funny. I think McKinstry is a better And again, we're talking about slight differences. I think McKinstry is a better press man corner than Arnold. Arnold might be a more complete corner in the other things he can do. I think press man is the strength of McKinstry's game. He's a true cover corner. He's very comfortable matching up on the outside. That's what he is, and he's really good at it. That you may remember last summer, people talked about him as a top 10, top 15 pick. I don't think his tape was poor this year by any means. But this guy, there's very few corners, certainly in this draft, who can play mirror match press with the poise and composure of McKinstry. Consistently showed the ability to stay in phase, attached to the receiver through intermediate and vertical routes. He's really, really good at mirror match press man.
And as we move along here, the question with Nate Wiggins is because you look at the length and the speed, do the attributes match the level of play? So what are your thoughts on him?
Well, it's the weight too. He's 173 pounds.
Ooh.
So
over 6'1".
Yeah, that's a concern. But you're dealing with a guy that is an explosive athlete. Okay, now he does play physically at times on the outside and press. It's not as if he's unwilling to do that. He certainly can play mirror match. Where he's really, really good is explosive plant and drive closing speed from off coverage. I can't remember every guy I've seen in recent years, but he's at the top of the list when it comes to guys playing off and then driving on throws in front of him. Really explosive doing that. Now, he knows he's fast because there are a lot of times watching his tape in mirror match press man where you could tell he sort of let the receiver gain half a step or a step, knowing that he could easily run with him. Again, I don't know if that's viewed as a problem or not, but he's fast. I mean, he ran a 4.28 and he's long. So the big question with him as you project and transition him to the league will be how his weight impacts his deployment. Is he a starting outside corner? Is he a sub outside corner? Can he play 65, 70 snaps a game as a starter? Does he only have to play in sub? He's an outside corner. He's not going to play in the slot. But that the 173 for coaches is a concern with a lot of the big receivers in this league.
Greg, this sounds like an almost identical conversation, and maybe this isn't fair. I'm not putting words in your mouth, that we were having last year about Emmanuel Forbes.
Forbes, I knew you were going to say that. Who, by the way, struggled big time and got benched this year. So it does mean something. What it means, again, different coaches will see that differently, Jeff. I think this guy's overall corner traits are a little better than Forbes, but he's 173 pounds and he's over 6'1". He's thin.
Yeah, we all saw. I mean, AJ Brown gave Forbes some real problems with his physicality.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I think, like I said, Wiggins. I mean, he has such economy and efficiency of motion. I think he's a little better prospect than Forbes, but Forbes was a first-round pick, as I recall.
Yeah.
And Forbes. I get in this conversation all the time, and with my guys on the matchup show too. Everybody said Forbes has great ball production because he had all these interceptions, and so many of those interceptions were just terrible throws by the quarterback that were thrown right to Forbes. I mean, people say, well, he's around the ball. Well, where else should he be?
Good point.
He's supposed to run away from the receivers and run to the other side of the field. I mean, if it's a bad throw and it's thrown right to him, where else is he supposed to be?
Yeah. Good
stuff. That's funny. Very good.
All right, let's move on. We'll go to the sort of, I believe this is sort of now where the second tier of.
Yeah, although there's one guy I've been watching him the last couple of days, and I'm not even quite done, but I hadn't gotten to him and I wanted to.
Okay.
If I could,
why don't you go ahead and take it from there? Because I like that tease. So who's the guy?
It's the Iowa State corner, TJ Tampa.
Okay. What do you like about him?
6'1", 189. I really like his tape. I mean, he's one of those guys I'm watching and I'm thinking to myself, why isn't he thought of a little more highly? Now, again, when I say that, I don't mean he should be a top 10 pick. That's not my point at all. You know me, I don't get into, where guys get drafted. There's all kinds of reasons how draft boards are mapped out. And in this particular draft with the quarterbacks and the receivers and the offensive line, you know, it you don't know that stuff. Mm-hmm. But this guy's really interesting to me. I mean, he's got really desirable length. He's got really good athleticism. He's smooth. He's fluid. He plays mirror match. He's physical. I mean, there's a lot of shots where he just jams the receiver off the ball. He's got really good arm length because don't forget, he's 6'1". I'm really liking what I've seen so far. I've got another game or two to take a peek at, including the Texas game, which obviously they've got receivers. So I'm in fact, it's when we're done doing this, I'm going to watch the Texas game. But I really like what I've seen so far, and I've seen 4 games up to this point. So it's there's something about the kid I really like. So you know, again, I can only tell you what I think, but I really, you know, the 6'1" matters.
Let's stay with the second group, and a guy kind of like Quinyon Mitchell's had a great offseason, Senior Bowl, Combine. He's done it all. It's Max Melton out of Rutgers. What are your thoughts on him?
He was another kind of fun guy to watch. He's another guy that has great quickness. He's pretty sudden in his movements. He's kind of a glider, but he does have explosive burst to stride out to carry vertical routes. You know, again, played mirror match press man pretty effectively. Stayed in phase through the route. I would say at times, you know, he had some balance issues at times, which I think can be corrected, particularly in press. You know, he's one of those guys that got back on his heels at times. And when you get back on your heels as your first move in press, you're sort of in recovery mode right away because you've got to get back on balance. But I mean, I think he's got a lot of really good traits. He ran a 4.39. He's got sudden feet and movement. He's got loose hips. He changes direction easily. He's really aggressive and competitive. I mean, he's just a feisty player. So he's a higher level traits guy. I'm sure he's going to be a day 2 guy, you know, just because corner is such a premium position. Mm-hmm. You know, is he as big as you'd ideally like on the outside? Probably not, but he does have extensive experience playing in the slot as well. So it wouldn't be brand new to him if you saw him that way, because he's 5'11", 187. In an ideal world, you'd like bigger, but that doesn't mean he can't play outside.
By the way, his arm length is pretty good for a
really
guy.
Good. Yeah, 32 inches for his height.
32 1/8 is really good at 5'11", but you know, it's cool. I don't know if you know about the family. The dad, Gary, played in the NFL briefly. Obviously his brother's is with the Packers. His mom was an athlete at Rutgers. Dad was. He's got another brother played, I think, at Delaware State. This is quite the family, and
right.
It's a pretty good story.
No, he's going to be drafted. I'm pretty certain on day 2. And you know, if you don't see him purely as an outside guy, he'll play in the slot.
Okay. Yeah, maybe perhaps even a high-end nickel in the league.
Yep.
All right, good stuff. Moving on, and we know how important versatility is, not just for the Eagles, but for other teams that are playing a lot of these sub-package defenses.
And I think an important point, Jeff, too, is, you know, he's played it. You know, everybody just assumes, oh, bring a guy inside.
Sure.
Well, if he's never, ever played it, and then you're going to teach him how to play it at the NFL level. We've talked about the slot corner before. There's a lot that goes into playing slot. It's not just, oh, yeah, his traits look good, put him inside. You know,
that's what we're battling with the kid that the Eagles have, Isaiah from the Colts, who is
Rogers.
Yeah, who is not at the NFL level, played a ton of nickel, but because he's so short, everybody just says, "Oh, have him compete at nickel." But
he's never played that in the league,
right,
that I know of. I mean, I remember watching him at Indy, and he did not play in the slot.
Right, correct.
Small frame too, right?
Yeah,
small frame guy.
Greg, how about Missouri's Rakestraw Jr.? What do you see from him?
You know, this guy has played in the slot. I mean, this guy's played outside and in the slot, and he's kind of, Jeff, in a similar situation because this guy's 5'11", 183. Now, this guy plays with an attitude, though. I mean, this guy, you know, the way I describe it, the term I use is he's got an outstanding playing personality. I think he could be effective on the outside because he's really one of those guys that he is just super feisty, super competitive. He can play off coverage. Although I think some teams will see him as a slot corner because he just doesn't have the size and the bulk. He's kind of thin framed. You know, and I think that you're dealing with a guy that can play in the slot because he's so tough playing the run. I thought he and Arnold really were the two toughest guys in terms of how they approached playing the run. But he played press man on the outside in the SEC at a pretty high level. Patience, discipline, balance, body control, fluid hips. He opened and matched receivers. His arm length is also really good, 32 inches for being 5'11". So he would jam and disrupt at times. I think coaches are going to like the way this kid plays. So it's just a matter of your team and where you see him fitting in, because he has meaningful experience playing both outside and the slot.
So, Greg, a guy you mentioned to us recently, you said, I really want to talk about him. That's Kyrie Jackson out of Oregon. Tell us about him.
Yeah, no, he's a little different cat compared to the guys we were just talking about.
Okay.
This guy is
long,
6'3 3/4. Okay.
Oh.
That makes him intriguing just in and of itself. Okay. I mean, because there's not a lot of 6'3 3/4 outside corners, really long arms, incredibly wide wingspan, played press, a lot of press on Oregon's defense, physical, also showed he could play mirror match, which you're concerned about because, then you get into, can he flip his hips? Is he loose hipped? And he wasn't bad in that regard. There were times that he was a little segmented and sticky and didn't look real comfortable. And that's going to be a little bit of a concern. So, that's why this guy's not going to be a first round pick. But he's, the stride length does matter when you're talking about then, carrying vertical routes. I mean, he does have stride length. I thought that he showed enough quickness, short area quickness and body control to sink and stop to play intermediate routes. We'll see. I mean, he was pretty physical. He stayed in phase throughout the route. He has length, obviously. He's a guy that fascinates me. I'm curious to see where he gets drafted. We don't know how teams see him because we don't know draft boards, but he's 6'3 3/4. That's big.
Yeah, at first I was thinking it sounds like you're describing an Ahkello Witherspoon type of cornerback, but even Ahkello, I don't think is 6'4", almost 6'4".
No, he's not that big. And while he's not been a star in the league, Ahkello Witherspoon, he's played in the league for a good number of years now. Now he hasn't become a great player.
Right.
I remember doing him coming out of Colorado. But he's played in the league, and wherever he goes, it seems like he starts.
Yeah, and he is another long-armed guy. He's about 6'2", but which is tall for a corner. But yeah, another long-limbed type of player. All right, good stuff on Kyrie Jackson. Let's finish off the corner group with two guys here: Kamari Lassiter from Georgia and Mike Sanders. Is it Sainristill from Michigan? Sainristill.
Former receiver. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, let's do Sainristill just because he's totally a different guy. He was really fun. I mean, Michigan has so many guys on defense. Sainristill will be a slot corner in the league. That's what he'll be. I mean, he played outside on occasion in Michigan, but when I watched him, the guy I thought of was Mike Hilton. I think he's very much like that. He's competitive. He's physical. Hilton is 5'9", 178, but we know from having seen him in the league for years and years that this guy is tough, competitive, can match up in man, can play zone. I think Sainristill is very much the same kind of player. I think that's what he is, and I think he'll be really good at it. The question is, where do you draft guys like that? Everybody says how important your slot corner is, but nobody seems to draft guys who are slot corners relatively high, So, because this guy's 5'9" 3/8", 182. I mean, theoretically, can he play on the outside? Yeah, he did in college. I would doubt that he'd be seen that way in the NFL.
Greg, I had a team tell me that they actually thought he could play some safety, which was interesting because he's kind of new to the cornerback position.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was interesting.
Well, he's played some safety because Michigan did a lot of stuff on defense.
Okay.
He had an interception in the national championship game as a cover 2 safety, can he do that? Sure, he can. Safety now becomes, what are you asking your safeties to do? And he's only 182, so you're not going to think of him, even though he's physical and competitive and all that good stuff, he's 182. So he's not really a box safety, so I think he's a slot corner, to me anyway.
but just one more thing on it. He had 6 interceptions because you were talking earlier. It's sometimes
Yeah,
the
he
guy
did.
just happens to be there with bad throws. Anything stand out about those picks that you could recall?
Well, he's a former receiver, so he does have really good ball skills. I've
Okay.
seen a bunch of them. I've seen them all actually.
Okay.
And some were really, really good. I mean, he's got really good ball skills. He knows how to attack the ball. I mean,
It's good. Oh.
and that matters to coaches. I've
Yeah.
learned that really matters to coaches. They want corners that have ball skills.
And how about Lassiter from Georgia? Because the Eagles can't stop taking players from Georgia, so go get a recap of him.
Yeah, I like Lassiter. It seems like he hasn't been talked about very much lately.
Mhm.
I think he's kind of a lean, wiry corner. He's 5'11 and a half. He's 186. He's comfortable playing press man. He stabs receivers a lot off their releases, which gets him right on balance. And then he's on balance to carry vertically and get his head around to locate the ball, which I thought he did very well. I thought he played zone coverage really well. I thought, he understood how to minimize the conflict that you have as a zone corner when there's 2 and 3 man route combinations to your side of the field, because they're trying to get you in conflict because there's gray areas in coverage. I thought he really understood that. I like Lassiter. I haven't heard his name much over the last, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 weeks, Adam. I don't know if you have, but I think this guy's a pretty good prospect.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to go in the second round almost certainly, and look. I'm not sure why he wouldn't be highly thought of. I mean, he's a guy.
Yeah, I don't know. I like him.
Weird. Yeah. So it's I think Jeff's right. I think this is a pretty deep group, but I think Greg, your point was not super high end guys, and
not in terms of coming out. We know some of these
Right.
guys will become really good. We know that, but all we can do is do it as they're coming out now. That's all we can do.
Right, and then project. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Awesome. All right, let's move into defensive backs, safeties, I should say, and versatile players. And we really have to have a discussion about Cooper DeJean from Iowa, because he could be a corner, he could be a safety, he could be a nickel, he could be all three, Greg, depending on the scheme that he winds up in. Give me your evaluation, but also where you think the NFL might see him, just based on what
I think that'll be team specific, to be honest with you. I think he probably doesn't have the ideal corner traits that you'd want. He's a little stiff. His transitions are not as smooth and comfortable as you'd ideally like. You wouldn't describe him necessarily as fluid, but he's a straight line linear athlete, an explosive straight line linear athlete. So there are times he looks really sudden because it's straight line, but obviously playing corner is not just straight line. I think when you saw the stiffness and tightness in his hips when he played press, because when he had to open up and turn to run, it was just a little segmented. So, I think the feeling is that he's probably better suited to play safety. I think some teams, because he's super competitive and very tough, could see him as a star, a slot, meaning the Jalen Ramsey position that he played with the Rams. And again, I'm not making a direct comparison to Jalen Ramsey. I'm just speaking about the position. But if you play a lot of zone, like maybe Gus Bradley, who plays a lot of zone, might look at Cooper DeJean and say, you know what, he's a corner for me. I think it all depends on how you see your defense and what you want to ask your corners to do foundationally. But he's, you're dealing with a guy that is straight line explosive, super competitive, knows, really good hands, catches the ball when he has an opportunity. So we'll see. I mean, it's going to depend on the team.
Right. And the program he comes from, Iowa, I mean, they are known for playing almost nothing but zone on defense. Do they do a lot of press within that zone? Or
I mean, he has obviously many snaps of press, but because when you play a lot of snaps, you're going to play press.
Sure.
But he's more of a runway guy as opposed to like a short area, loose hipped quickness guy.
Gotcha.
He can run. I mean, like I said, he's straight line, linear, fast, and explosive.
So as we stay on here on the safety position, a guy played a lot at Minnesota and he had a lot of ball production, 13 picks. That's Tyler Nubin. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, of the safeties, and I haven't seen 25 safeties, but I've seen, a good amount. I would say I probably like him the best of the guys I've seen. And I think he has an ability that, you know, it's hard to teach, I think. He is really, really good at seeing things from the back end and, reading the quarterback and reading routes and being able to react to that really, really quickly. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do. I mean, he had an instinctive feel for reading the route concepts and the quarterback. And that's the main reason he had such high ball production throughout his career, because he just saw that really, really well from the back end. I don't know if you can teach that. He can do that. And he played downhill really well. He's got really good size. He can be an interchangeable safety. He's got the physical traits. He's got the playing demeanor. It would not surprise me, and I've also heard great things about him because I know his agent. It would not surprise me if he was a day one starter, and he's a complete safety kind of prospect. He's multidimensional.
Look at Minnesota putting out these great safeties with Antoine Winfield and now Tyler Nubin. Nice. Good job by that program. Let's get into Cam Kitchens from Miami. Greg, we watched him at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, Cam Kitchens, he's a really interesting guy because he did not test well, and I'm sure for some people they're going to go, "Oh boy, that's a big problem." But he plays so much faster and more explosively than he tested. Now he played both on the back end. He played in the box. His play speed and range was much faster than a really disappointing 40 time, which I think was 4.65. Which, being at the combine, a lot of people are like, "Ooh, this guy, he can't play now." But I don't think that's representative of the way he plays, because I think one of the defining traits of his game was his build-up acceleration and tracking speed to make plays both downhill from the back end and sideline to sideline. He showed top-down plan and drive burst and quickness on routes in front of him. He was willing to hit. He's a really interesting guy. I mean, I think playing style-wise, two guys who are in the league, came to my mind just stylistically. One is Budda Baker and the other was Darnell Savage. Stylistically, I think he's similar to those guys.
Wow, that's it. And ball production was really good, 11 picks.
Yep.
But he ran in the 4.6s, which is
4.65. His 10-yard split was, okay. Vertical jump was good, which they used to, as an explosiveness thing. But as a tackler, a lot of college safeties, when they run and hit, they drop their head. They've got to be taught, that a little bit, but they all do that.
Let's go back to Georgia. And how about Javon Bullard?
Yeah, he's a really good prospect. He played slot last year in 2022 and safety this year. So he pretty much can do whatever you want. He can be your slot corner if you really want him to be your slot corner. He's a really good player. So he's got alignment and position versatility. Love the way he plays from a personality standpoint. He's somewhat like Nubin. His recognition processing and his quick trigger reaction time, results in the fact that he plays really fast. He has great range to make plays. Seems he's another guy with an instinctive feel for reading the drop of the quarterback and the quarterback's eyes. And he ties that to the depth and timing of the receiver's routes. Really, really good at that. And as I said, he could play slot corner too.
Awesome. All right. We've seen a lot of versatility here with some safeties who can play in the slot. How about Jaden Hicks from Washington State as we finish off the D-backs?
Well, there's going to be one I mentioned.
Okay.
Not on your list, but Jaden Hicks he's essentially a box safety. He's not going to play on the back end in the NFL. He's really good in the box. But he's not going to play. When I say not, that, obviously guys play all over, and you have to at times. I mean, you can go back to Cam Chancellor. There were times he played post safety for the Seahawks, with the Legion of Boom. But that's not what Hicks is going to do in the league. He's a strong box defender in the run game. Really good feel for navigating the box, working through traffic to make tackles. He made the high percentage of his plays in the box, and very often he was unimpeded, with a straight line to the runner. So I don't know how often that'll happen in the league, but he navigated it really, really well. So, again, depending on what your defense is, I could almost see him as being a dime safety as opposed to a starting safety, because he's, kind of limited in what he can do in your base, in your base or nickel. If you're a nickel defense, can he match up to tight ends? Yeah. I mean, he's 6'2", 211. He's got really good size.
Were you thinking Cole Bishop from Utah?
Yeah.
Okay. What are your thoughts on him real quick?
I love Cole Bishop's game. Love his game. I mean, he could be my number 2 safety. I think that he's a really, really good player. I think he's play on the back end. He can play in the box. He's long. He's athletic. He's got size, movement, versatility, competitiveness, savvy, intelligence. He's to me, he's got everything you want. I think he's a really good safety prospect. And, I think seeing him at the combine, he tested really, really well. He strikes me as a day one starter in the league, wherever he goes. I really liked his tape a lot.
Yeah, the only knock on him is his arm length is kind of short for guys.
Yeah, that's the knock.
Weird. It's
29 3/4, which is weird.
It's hard.
6'2", 206.
Yeah.
So you got to decide what that means.
True.
Yeah, you got to decide what that means for you.
The other Utah safety is going to be a day 3 guy. Probably.
Yeah, I didn't do him, so I
was going to ask if you did. Okay, no problem. Let's move on then. That really good stuff there on Cole Bishop. Let's go. We'll finish it off with some inside linebackers, Greg, including one name that's going to be familiar for a lot of Eagles fans. But we will start with the name that I hear the most as far as explosion and suddenness, and that's Edgerrin Cooper out of Texas A&M. Do you like his tape?
Well, that's what he is. Oh yeah, I mean he's an explosive guy. He's got sudden movement. He's got instant acceleration. He's got elite closing burst. I mean, you're talking about a great athletic profile. 6'2" and 1/8", 230. This guy is just sudden. He's got hip and core flexibility. He's got a reactive trigger that just is unbelievable. Now, again, you're going to start getting caught up in, which is sometimes hard to know in college, with the idea about key and diagnose. Is he slow doing that? That's hard to know sometimes because you don't know exactly how he's coached. But he's definitely a see ball, get ball guy, and he's the most explosive stacked backer in this draft class.
Well, Greg, another guy in this class who's had a ton of production, and he played a lot at North Carolina State. That's Payton Wilson. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, he's long and athletic because he's a big kid now.
Almost 6'4".
Yeah, he's a big kid. I got a chance to meet and talk with him at the Maxwell this year. He's a height, weight, speed guy. He's 6'4" and 1/8". He's 234. He's at his best as a run and chase player. It maximizes his play speed and range. I see him more like that as opposed to a stacked box defender, tasked with taking on and playing off blocks, which I don't think he did at a really high level. But if he does keep himself clean in the box, he's got a feel for that. So he finds the ball and he makes tackles. He shoots gaps. There's a playmaking dimension to him. The guy he kind of reminded me of, but he's bigger, was Pete Werner when he came out of Ohio State, who's a starter for the Saints. And Werner was 6'3", 238 with a 4.59 40. And Payton Wilson is, 6'4", 234, and he ran, I think, a 4.43, if memory serves me correct. I think you're dealing, he's a good prospect. He tends to tackle a lot with his body, like his chest. Mm-hmm. And people are concerned about the injury factor.
That's interesting. So when you're asked to play stack linebacker, right? And
that's what he's going to be. He played obviously a lot of
downhill to
a lot of positions in North Carolina State, but and I talked to him about this when I met him and talked to him. He said every team that's talked to me says I'm a stack backer because that's what he is in the NFL.
Right.
But this whole idea of playing 5 positions, that's not the NFL. That's happy talk on Twitter.
Sure. But you see him more as a guy who's got to get around the block than, say, go through the block to get to the running back, because you said he's more of a run and chase than
more than likely.
Okay.
Again, I think he's big enough and theoretically physical enough because he's not a soft player by any means, but he doesn't really play that way.
Gotcha. That's interesting. All right. Let's talk about a familiar name to Eagles fans. That would be Jeremiah Trotter Jr., son of legendary Axeman Jeremiah Trotter.
And after he makes plays, he does the axe.
How great. Yeah. I mean, it would be pretty cool if he were to be an Eagle and doing that. I think that would be pretty fun.
I really liked his tape a lot. The big question with him again is going to be size. He's 6 feet 228. You know, you wouldn't call him an explosive athlete, but you could make the argument that his tape was great. I mean, it was really good. You know, he lacks size, he lacks length, he lacks pure explosiveness, but you could say he compensates for those, you know, deficiencies with really high level football intelligence, understanding positioning. He's really quick to key and diagnose. He's got great balance and body control. He can contort himself to play around blockers without losing gap integrity. I really like the player on tape. He doesn't check all the necessary boxes. And, you know, you guys both know from talking to people that there'll be teams that either don't have him on their draft board or have him way down because he doesn't check the critical factor boxes that they might have for a stacked backer. But, you know, he consistently makes plays in all phases of the game. He's a really, really good blitzer, too, a really good blitzer. And they used him that way a lot. So, like, I thought watching his tape that he was a much better prospect than Nakobe Dean.
Interesting. Okay. And finally, we're going to go back to Michigan and a guy that's an interesting prospect. That's Junior Colson.
Yeah, he's going to be a good player in the league. He may not be a star, but he's going to be a really, you know, he's just a good, yeah, I hate to say it, you know, he's just a good football player, but that's what he is. And I think what you're dealing with him is you're dealing with a guy that's you wouldn't say he's a quick trigger, sudden burst guy. He's just an efficient reactor. Made most of his tackles as a scrape and flow linebacker behind the first level of the defense. He was much more of a read and react guy. You know, the thing that doesn't stand out about his game is he doesn't come across as like an impact player, but he's just a good player. Like, I came away watching his tape, and Michigan was one of those teams this year I had to watch, you know, the same games over and over and over, a lot of stuff because they have so many guys. You know, I saw him, like, I'll give you some names for people that, you know, follow the league. And obviously we know that this is not just for the Eagles. He struck me as, like, think of a Jordan Hicks, think of a Jermaine Pratt, think of a Zaire Franklin, that kind of player. He's going to be a good player. He just may not be a dynamic impact player.
Those guys could play in the league 7, 8, 9 years. Wow.
10 years. Oh, yeah. I mean, Zaire Franklin was among the league leaders in tackles, but no one would say, as good as he is at what he is, no one would say, Adam, that he's a dominant impact playmaker. He's just a really good player. I think Colson is that kind of guy. He'll be a good player.
Greg, before we wrap this up, because we've gone through our list, just like the other two positions, is there a stacked linebacker who really caught your attention that we haven't thrown at you?
Oh, boy. I got to see the list of linebackers to see who I've watched.
I just wanted to know if somebody jumped off your head, like, you know, hey, this guy, I remember, you know, he really made a lot of plays and people aren't talking about him enough.
I don't think so, because I'm looking at the list of guys that I've seen. And I tell you, I this might be crazy now that you mention it. One of my favorite guys to watch was the other stack backer from Michigan, Michael Barrett.
Okay.
I really like this kid. Again, he's good. He won't check all the boxes, but I really like the way he played. And he was actually a record-setting quarterback in high school in the state of Georgia. So, you know, you know, you're not going to look at him and go, wow, he's an exceptional athlete. You know, he's a pretty good athlete. He's just, again, doesn't check the boxes. He's small. You know, and I'm not going to sit here and say he's Nick Bolton, but there were a lot of teams when Nick Bolton came out that said, you know, he's under 6 feet. You know, we don't know what he is. He's turned out pretty good. And like I said, it's not an exact analogy, but I think Michael Barrett could be a starting player in the NFL.
All right. Good stuff. That has done it for cornerbacks, safeties, stack linebackers, and for our entire college prospect preview that we have done this season with Greg Cosell. And now we leave it in the hands of the NFL teams to try to make sense of it all, as the draft is Thursday night, first round. And of course, on Inside the Birds, we will have the best draft coverage available that's out there. So make sure you stick with us here on Inside the Birds. Thank you, Greg, for another great season of the Intel with Greg Cosell. And for Greg and Adam Kaplan, I'm Jeff Mosher. Catch you on the next.